Welcome. As I said, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's so wonderful to have you here on Quad Education's webinar. Before we formally get started, I do have a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. First and foremost, this webinar is recorded, which means you will receive a recording in your inbox within the next day or two. We're looking at running it for about 45 minutes, 30 minutes of just content and just giving you the most value possible. And of course, leaving a 15-minute window for question and answers where you really get to ask any sort of questions you have, whether you're a parent or a student. Get to ask our panelists here today and all around personal statements and what that looks like. A little bit of an agenda for tonight's webinar is we'll be discussing the importance of a strong personal statement, brainstorming and outlining tips, writing compelling narratives and showcasing your unique voice, and of course that Q&A session that we mentioned. Our wonderful experts. I'll let you two introduce yourselves. Nick, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Nick. I am a researcher by day and a former admissions professional as well. My research is in the space of higher education. So not only have I worked in higher education as a practitioner, but I also do on the ground research related to student success, retention, as well as faculty hiring and retention. And I went to and worked at UCLA.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael. I have worked with students in a variety of capacities for close to a dozen years now. SAT, ACT tutor, college counselor. I was a full-time high school math teacher for 5 years. I've also done education research. I went to the University of Southern California, so that makes me Nick's avowed enemy, but my wife went to UCLA, so that makes me his friend, I guess. So it all evens out. I attended my undergrad at the University of Michigan, and I'm really excited to get to talk to you all today.
Thank you both for being here. So I just want to take a moment, and I'm excited to share a little bit about who we are at Quad and what we offer. So this is for everyone out there, whether you've been on one of our webinars before or this is your first time. So who's Quad and what we offer? Quad Education is a globally recognized college admissions consulting firm with the largest team of admissions counselors in the world. With a 98% success rate, our students are 11 times more likely to get accepted at their top choice colleges. We assist students anywhere from the 6th grade to undergraduate transfer candidates in applying to their dream schools. We are firm believers in starting the college application process as early as possible. For our middle schoolers and early high schoolers, we offer college candidacy and profile development. This process focuses on building each student's resume to highlight their strengths. We want the candidate to stand out. So we will work with your student to identify clubs and leadership positions, find extracurricular activities and volunteer opportunities, and of course assist in creating next year's class schedule. Our college development program extends outside of the classroom and the regular school year. Since schools are looking at more than academics these days, our counselors also help plan summer activities. These can include summer courses, internships, shadowing, research opportunities, and giving back to the community through encouraging students to create service projects. Once we've helped shape an outstanding candidate, we extend our support for shaping the perfect application. We're here to help with comprehensive application support from picking the right major to building a balanced list of schools, activity list creation, obtaining letters of recommendation, interview preparation, and applying to scholarships. Our admissions counselors are also essay writing experts who will brainstorm, outline, and edit your supplemental essays and personal statements until they are perfect. These essays serve as a platform to showcase the best aspects of our students, drawing connections between their individual life journeys and the overarching themes of each school they apply to. Whether it's your main application or those extra essays for scholarships, we've got your back with unlimited edits. Overall, our goal is to build the perfect candidate and application. We utilize every tool in our skill set to ensure the products that we create are with students in mind and that help our students stand out from the rest of the pack. If you're interested in learning more about us and our packages, we offer free personalized consultations via video, phone, or email, ensuring individualized support. Our admissions counselors are always ready and willing to help you through the process, so you don't have to navigate it alone, no matter where you are in the application process. that's a little bit about us. Please don't hesitate to go to quadeducationgroup.com, where you'll be able to schedule your one-on-one with one of our experts. With that being said, I'd love to pass it over to Michael and Nick to discuss the importance of a personal statement, of a strong personal statement, I should say.
Yeah, so it's not just important to write a personal statement. You're going to have to do that to apply no matter what. It's important to have a strong personal statement, one that's good and is going to make you stand out and highlight who you want to be. So why does a strong personal statement matter? Personal statements provide insight into your personality, experiences, and aspirations. Otherwise, you are a series of numbers such as GPA, SAT score, a list of activities. This actually shows who a student is. Admission committees understand who you are beyond those numbers that I just talked about.
Right. And so the impact of that personal statement can be to significantly boost your application, specifically by differentiating you from, all those other pieces that you're going to submit. So if you're anything like me, I went to a very competitive high school where me and my, closest 50 friends had all taken the same class, load since 8th grade. We looked exactly the same on transcripts, and we, were only separated by our unique personal interests in the way that we communicated them and tied them to our rationales for where we were applying or what majors we were interested in. So that's really where, the personal statement comes in, is that differentiation and that building out and connection of all your other pieces of your application. And it shows your writing skills, your critical thinking, and your ability to think, critically and consciously about yourself and your goals and your interests.
So let's talk about how to brainstorm what you should write about and how to outline that paper. So first, self-reflection. So a student should think about what their key life experiences have been, what challenges have they encountered, how have they overcome those challenges, and what they have achieved that makes them unique. Specifically, think about what motivates and inspires you. What makes you special? What makes you tick? What makes you different than every other student who has the exact same grades and SAT scores as you? So some brainstorming techniques. These are just a few ideas to help get the ball rolling. It's very tough to be a creative thinker, so these are just really basic suggestions, but everyone's got their own methods. Mind mapping. So this is where you write down ideas and then try to visualize the connections between them so you can draw lines to try to put things together. Free writing. So I found a lot of students are so worried about perfection and coming up with a great personal statement that they don't even start writing. The best personal statement is one that is completed. So you should at least try to write something. So a free write can help do that, where either a counselor or a parent or even just independent student says, I'm going to write for 10 solid minutes, and just starts writing. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad or the worst thing anyone's ever written in the history of humanity. Something's on the page. And then lastly, lists. So especially coming up at the very early stage of what experiences, challenge, achievements you want to highlight, making a list of some things that have been significant in your life, some things that you value, and some goals that you set can help kind of put a nice frame around what you're trying to accomplish in a personal statement.
And just to add to that, one thing that I do with some of my students is ask them to ask either their parents or their siblings or their friends to sort of talk about what they think the students' interests are, because you can kind of do double duty with, separating out what parents are interested in, what students are interested, because sometimes they are not aligned. And also, sometimes the people that know you best are able to articulate what you're actually interested in a lot faster than you are, as that, the person that's trying to sit down and write that challenging, open-ended prompt, as Michael mentioned. The writing is the challenge here. And so, if your best friend says, well, you've always been really passionate about cancer research, then maybe that's where you should start. So don't be afraid to phone a friend either. Speaking of some of those example questions, a lot of the, personal statement questions are going to be those really open-ended. What challenges have you overcome? Tell us about a, difficulty that you faced and what you did to resolve it. What are your passions, as I mentioned? Tell us about experiences in your life that have shaped your future goals. One easy thing is that anyone can make a Common App question or a Common App profile and just look at what the prompts are if you really need something to respond to. But really, they're going to be kind of in that general realm.
So what should a general outline for a personal statement look like? They're not as long as some students may argue that they are. They're pretty short. So you really have to take 3 tight sections. An introduction, I actually do think the introduction is the most important part of a personal statement because you really want to catch your reader's attention right away. So a strong opening will capture the reader's attention. College admissions counselors read literally thousands of these. So you don't want to be so cliche, so rote that they're mentally checked out before they even get through the first paragraph. So this can be an anecdote, a quote, or something really unique that sets the tone for the rest of your essay. Then you go into the body. So this is detailing the experiences, the challenges, the growth, achievements, and each paragraph should build on the previous one to create a coherent narrative. This is not each paragraph lists one different thing I did. This is telling one story and telling it well. And then wrap it up with a really nice conclusion, reflect on how those experiences have prepared you for college, summarize the main points that you want your reader to take away, and try to leave a lasting impression so that they remember who you are and don't immediately forget that you wrote a personal statement for them.
Right. And one shape that I like to think about for the personal statement is the hourglass of sort of starting broad with that hook and then getting into that body, that's the details, and then bringing it back out to remind, the reader what you're actually here writing about. Yeah, that's an excellent way to start your outline. So again, a sample outline, an anecdote, or an impactful statement. I find that a lot of students that I work with love starting with kind of a verbal or like dialogue piece that sets the stage for whatever they're going to talk about, which is a little bit more interesting than one challenge that I overcame in life was, but yeah, just an additional outline slide. And then now we'll shift into talking about writing techniques.
So how can a student write a compelling narrative? So unlike some of the school writing you do, this is a lot more of a story, and you should be using storytelling elements. So who are the characters of the story? What are the people involved? What are their characteristics? It's not enough. Some students are like, my grandma said this. Who's your grandma? Give a little bit of color of who she is. The setting, where is this taking place? When is this taking place? Did this happen a month before the student wrote it? Did this happen 75 years ago and it's the story of your ancestors? Be very clear where you are and when you are in time. Conflict, it's not interesting to be like, I showed up to school, did everything I was supposed to do, and I was great. There should be some sort of conflict, some sort of challenge that they overcame, some sort of obstacle, something that shows why this is an interesting story to read. And then, again, that resolution. What challenges were overcome? How were they overcome? And what's the main lesson? Why are you telling the story? What did you learn or achieve that you think reflects on a personality trait that you want the college to take away from this?
Yeah. And so one thing that I find myself saying every time I meet with a student to talk about their personal statement, and I'm sure you do too as well, Michael, is show, don't tell. For every sentence that says, when you move to a new city, it can be really challenging to fit in. I don't want you to tell me that it can be really challenging to fit in. I want you to show me in, using those narrative details and using those storytelling elements, what happened specific to you that made it challenging to fit in. So using those vivid details and those examples to illustrate those points, don't say you're determined, describe a time that indicates to a reader that you are determined. And the other thing is really authenticity in voice. So, in the same vein as a lot of students, their transcripts might look similar. You don't want to have something that you submit as your personal statement that is either so put through the editing ringer that it no longer has a voice, which I have absolutely read as an admissions counselor, where I've just thought, oh, this has passed through too many parents and adults and coworkers and people with an opinion that I no longer have any idea what this student actually thinks. But it also starts to sound, I don't want to say fake, but just less genuine, so less authentic. And so that's something that you want to avoid. And so really just reading to feel true to yourself is hugely important, I think, on these. And we're going to pass to Andrea for a moment.
Hello. Thank you. So I would just want to take a quick minute and just check in with everyone. If you've been thinking about booking a consultation, and I know earlier we spoke a little bit about that, what that looks like, please go ahead, take out your phones and scan our QR code. Because you're here today, our gift to you is a 10% off your entire program with this particular code on screen, quad 10 off. In the meantime, I do have a couple of questions I wanted to go over with our panelists here. They're questions that our experts and that we often get during these one-on-one consultations. And I thought this would be a really great time to just go over them. Michael, Nick, I think I'll just read them out loud and let you guys answer them. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Fantastic. So a couple of the questions. The first one, what are the restrictions for a personal statement? So I think this is regarding length.
Oh, okay. I would say, so the Common App personal statement has a cap of 650 words. I would say almost everything is going to be between that 300 and 700 word range, which is about 2 pages, give or take, double spaced. But it really depends. You know, if you go on the Common App website, it will tell you you can submit not 650 words. You can submit less as long as you feel good about it. But there actually is a, you know, floor of 250. It won't let you submit less than 250. But yeah, I think that's pretty much the main restriction when it comes to actual length and kind of structure.
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying, it's supposed to be original work. This isn't supposed to be something that a student hands to a counselor or a friend or a parent and has them write it for them. It should be reflecting your original thoughts, just like a student would do for any class assignment.
I think that's a really great place to ask the next question, which is how personal should I get in my personal statement?
It's a really good question. It's just really what you're comfortable with and what you want to highlight. I've had a lot of students who are under the belief that they should write about the saddest thing that's ever happened to them and how they overcame that. I don't necessarily think that's the right approach at all, not even just for everyone, but I think most people, that's probably the wrong approach. I think I've seen personal statements that are really funny and are about like a super specific topic that's not really that personal, but that's just something interesting the student like to write about. I think those can be better than like, here's something really like I went on a trip to the Caribbean and volunteered, and here's what I learned about helping people. Like I've read that essay like 75 times.
1,000 times.
1,075 times. So you want to make sure that it's personal enough that you stand out, but it's not so personal that it's uncomfortable for the person to read.
Right. Like I had a student last year that wrote about how they became a party clown at the end of high school because a couple of their friends were really going through it and, you know, were having hard lifetimes, and they showed up to a, you know, birthday party dressed as a clown, and it really changed the vibe. And now they're, you know, doing medical work and theater. And so, you know, that's personal without being that like trauma mining or that like super overwrought experience mining. So personal, I think really my strongest note on this is like the voice should be so personal and so clear to you, but you can be writing about anything.
I just have to step in and say that I absolutely love that example. That's awesome. I've never heard that, but I guess that's what makes it unique and different, right? Lastly, the other FAQ that we often get, can I use the same personal statement for multiple applications?
Yes, but be careful. I have had students who are like, here's why I want to go to UCLA, but they didn't copy paste it to be the new college, and they're sending that off to like University of Washington or Vermont or wherever, and that's very awkward. You make sure if you're reusing stuff that you do calculate it to or target it towards the school you're actually applying to. Similarly, a lot of times schools will ask you, what's a program you're interested in? Why do you want to come to this school? And you should try to personalize that. If you say, I love the nice weather of Westwood, that's not really going to fit if you're going to the University of Minnesota. So make sure that you're targeting it to the college that you're applying to.
Right. And one thing that I advise students to do on that end, and I think this is a tactic that'll carry you well into adulthood, is you can write that sort of base statement and then highlight all the things that you need to change when you change who you're writing it for. So if you need to change it from Westwood to, you know, New Haven, or pick a new city, you know, all those programs, but you can certainly reuse but you got to be cognizant of the tailoring that is appropriate. Same thing with your resume. If you're applying for a different major than at one school than another school, you maybe want to highlight different things. But yeah, that'll all come up while you're writing too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen. To our wonderful audience joining us tonight, if you have a question, we'll make sure we get to those at the end of tonight's presentation, so feel free to drop them in the chat. Michael, Nick, it's back to you.
All right, thank you.
So Nick just gave a fantastic example of this, but how do you showcase your unique voice? How do you find your party clown in the story that you want to tell? So it should be your personal style. I find there's kind of like a house style that ends up when you manufacture a paper to death by having 11 different people give it that nice edit. So it should be your style and your personality. It should sound like you. This is the only voice you get to show to the college admissions team. So it should be you. It shouldn't be your college counselor or parent. And you should be consistent in tone and style throughout the statement. So if you're going for kind of that funny story like we just heard, you should be funny throughout. It shouldn't be jarringly into something really sad or something super duper serious. Try to keep the same style throughout and try to keep the narrative cohesive. Stick to the story you're telling. Don't go off onto a million tangents.
Yeah, and one other thing that I find occurs, and I don't know if this is true to your experience, Michael, is that sort of meandering narrative that becomes multiple stories and multiple time points, and then we've lost control of the time horizon of the personal statement. And did this take place over the course of a weekend? Did it take place over the course of a full year? I've stopped knowing, when this thing happened and in what context. So really maintaining consistency in tone, style, time, just reading for all of that. And again, I feel like we've said it till we're blue in the face, but maintaining that your personal statement should sound like it's personal to you. So we're just going to read an example and then we'll talk about it. But we stood in a circle on stage, introducing ourselves with our names and experience. The other students had lengthy lists, shows I hadn't even heard of. Barely audible, I mumbled, I was the lead protagonist in a play 5 years ago. I expected a laugh, this new kid who thought he could compete. Instead, a voice spoke up. No way, I remember that show. Remember how we put the kids in their spots before curtains? It was friend's name from elementary school who had been opposite me as the antagonist. Thoughts, Michael?
So I think this one, if we're setting up an anecdote, obviously we'd have to know where they're going with this. Is what challenge are they overcoming? It seems like they're doing a good job of kind of the narrative is going to be, I was shy, I put myself out there, and it turned out like things are, it's great to try new things. So I think in that sense, this is setting it up well. It's got a nice voice. It's got some good color of like, oh, I mumbled out this. Here's what I expected. So I think there's a lot of good stuff in here to build a coherent narrative.
Same. And one thing that I always bring up too is that, like, again, using the Common App as an example, last year there were 7 prompts. I tell my students, I don't want you to tell me what prompt you picked. I want to be able to tell from your opener what prompt you're responding to. And here I can tell exactly what you said. This is setting us up for, I was shy and I didn't know that if I would fit in, and where is that going to take us is clear from the opener. So we'll look at another example.
Yeah, let's look at another one. So this one says, one afternoon we were talking about how he was having motivational issues at school. He didn't care anymore and just wanted to be done with it. He was debating whether or not he was dropping out of high school, and I was trying to calm him down. I was trying to get him to see all sides before making a decision. Towards the end, after we talked through it all, we were both crying, which was weird. Neither of us ever cried, especially not in front of others. I hadn't cried in front of someone who wasn't my family since I was 6. It was one of the many things we had in common.
Yeah.
What do you think about this one, Nick?
So I think it's honestly a little bit more abstract than the previous one. It doesn't give us as many details. I don't know who we're talking with. I don't know what the motivational issues are. I kind of want to know what those motivational issues are. Is it burnout? Is it you don't love a teacher? One thing to note that I will always say is, let's avoid negatively framing anyone in our story. So here, I kind of want that more detail to know if we need to avoid something a paragraph from now. We don't know who him is. We don't know what their relationship is. So it's not bad, but I want more detail.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's also it's a little clunky on even just the pacing of it. It's a lot of like same length sentences, which change up the rhythm is just some good prose technique. There seem like commas missing, just some grammar mistakes that I think are a little problematic. And yeah, I think just anything where you are like the savior of someone, I'm very hesitant for that to be the narrative versus I had a personal issue and I overcame it, instead of being like, my friend was having trouble and I'm a great person, so I helped them. Like, I don't think that's a super compelling narrative. If we think in a story, there should be an arc that you go through as the protagonist. And this doesn't really have that. This is like, I'm a great person and here's why.
Yeah. Again, I was going to echo that too, that I don't love the structure of I helped a person. I kind of want the personal growth to be about the student. So even if it's senior year, mom had cancer and, we all learned how to deal with that and our responsibilities changed. I want it to be more about how the students' responsibilities changed, not about how they spent so much time helping mom, and about their personal growth. So just keeping that in mind. And then example 3. Yet it isn't enough to simply change my own mindset. Recognizing that the realm of discourse is dominated by privileged Western debaters, I helped launch organization in partnership with College Name to platform debaters from countries with less debate infrastructure, whether it be academies, coaching, or tournament opportunities. Organization provides an international platform allowing debaters around the world to upload videos of their speeches to receive feedback from accomplished judges. Moreover, I fundraised within my school so the international organization tournament could have free entry and subsidized travel, allowing debaters to participate from over 20 countries, from Peru to Uganda to Nepal. Thoughts?
I think this is like the right story to pick, but the way they wrote it reads like a 16-year-old who learned a bunch of new words, which I think is not great. 16-year-olds don't believe when adults are like, I know you don't know what that word means or just learned it a day ago. So like even that first sentence, like recognizing that the realm of discourse is dominated by privileged Western debaters, that seems like someone who just learned a bunch of new words, and that doesn't really reflect their personal voice. And again, this falls under the category of I am a nice person doing amazing things, and not I overcame challenges to set this up. So if you set up this story with what your role and why you're doing this, like what's your personal connection to this versus like, give me credit for being so nice. I think that's my biggest issue with it. But I really do think students need to realize you don't need dollar words. You need words that fit your personality and are like, don't feel like they're above your pay grade.
Yeah, I constantly am saying, let's dial back the SAT words that make this paragraph unreadable. Similarly, this example has a few sentences that I think suffer from the what is this doing for the narrative arc of the sentence failure. So like the first sentence, change your mindset about what? Let's find out. I know we immediately learn about debate, but what are we debating? What is your particular topic? If you've been in a debate organization for long enough, you have something that you really care about and something that's driving your participation in debate, something that you're bringing to, state and national oratory. We want that increased detail. And this is also a thing where I worry that this student's resume is going to heavily center whatever this organization is, and it might not be propelling them as much as they think it's propelling them.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. A lot of students just get the idea. They're like, here is my like foundation of everything that I'm going to put forward to the college. And I think colleges like to see a little bit of diversity of experience and of, of like interests. So if this is like a big part of your resume, maybe this isn't the story you should tell. It should be a little bit that goes beyond the resume. The colleges can already read your resume. If this says founder organization, then they're already going to know this. You don't necessarily need to tell this story.
One other point that I want to make here is, for me, I get an immediate sort of negative reaction to I helped launch blank in partnership with blank, because I can't tell the group how many times I've talked to students or I've read applications that have mentioned a nonprofit that they started, that they stopped doing in 6 months, that the website that they list on their resume is no longer active, and that it actually was already being done in their community by something else that's more established that they could have just volunteered at. So for me, I get like an immediate concern flag of, did this already exist? Was there a need for this? Is this already being served by other people? And is this something that you're going to continue? Because if it's not, it feels fake and inauthentic to me.
Yeah, adding one more very specific example, I've had a decent amount of students who are like, they're like, oh yeah, at age 12, I started a charity that my parents gave me all the money for and ran while I like helped. And that's like, it's very cool to think that when you're a teenager, but adults are like, you didn't start that. Like your parents did that. And usually it's an extension of work they're already doing. So be very cautious what's you and what's the partner.
Exactly. All right. Oh, we double clicked.
So let's talk about some common pitfalls to avoid. We've been hitting these. Number one is my personal, the one that gets me the most, the cliches. Avoid those overused phrases and themes. Again, I really want to emphasize, do not write the paper of I took a vacation to tropical country and did volunteer work and now I'm a changed person. That's like literally like a Google, you can Google like top cliche and that's probably it. You should be original and creative. Again, I think that clown example is perfect. That's probably the only high school party clown essay they're going to read all year. They're going to read 15,000 about doing charity work. So be unique. If charity work truly is what you want to write about, what's your unique angle on that makes it worth reading? We talked about this with example 2, grammar and spelling. So make sure that you are eliminating errors. Obviously, with the modern word processors, they're going to catch a lot of the spelling errors, but grammar is still a problem. I highly recommend having people proofread for you, or even going on to like a Grammarly or something that will check your grammar for you. And then lastly, off-topic content. We were talking about this a little bit as well. You have less than 2 pages to tell the story. You should not spend half a page wandering off into some tangent that has nothing to do with the main narrative. And you should make sure each paragraph is driving forward the points you want to make.
Yeah, and another thing too that is a conversation I've certainly had regarding cliches is I think students, particularly students in really competitive environments, start talking to each other about what they're writing, and they think, oh no, are we all writing the same personal statement about insert, best volunteering experience for Y career? So like, for instance, for medicine, a lot of students are going to volunteer at nursing homes or in hospice or, at the hospital, or do music therapy because they've been in orchestra. Like, that is one that is very common, but just because it's common doesn't mean it can't be effective when you personalize it. And so my advice is just, is it feeling too common when you're reading it? That might not be the way to go. But if it's, I meet with my grandma at the hospice and, that's why I'm there, even though I know that it's good for X, Y, and Z reason. So cliches are cliches for a reason. And I also don't want to read anymore. I went to Costa Rica to study Spanish for 4 weeks, and I am a different person now. Essays. But if you make it work, you've got options. So
yeah, don't say specifically, I thought I was helping them, but it was really them who were helping me. That's right. Like the worst line in all of essaydom.
If it starts to feel like an after-school special, turn back. And then final tips. So this, I think I say constantly with anyone that I meet with, there's simultaneously no time that's too early to start. And also, we've got plenty of runway. So starting early gives you the opportunity to revise often. Writing is rewriting. Seek feedback, but seek feedback carefully. I think one thing that adults learn, and I know that Michael and I both did our PhDs, you get to a point where you are getting feedback and it maybe no longer feels like feedback that you should be taking. So, know that there is a ceiling to feedback, and then just continue to be yourself and emphasize your interests and your passions and your, why you're doing things, because that's what's going to be the most compelling to read.
Yeah, I think that point of knowing what feedback to take, a lot of students end up with feedback from people that's like, pick a different story to tell, or like, don't do this, like, don't do what you've done. And if you're a student who feels strongly that you've picked the right anecdote that communicates the right thing, that might be feedback you need to reject, and you need to maybe change how you're structuring your story. But if they don't let someone tell you that you've picked the wrong thing, unless again, you're doing one of the cliches we mentioned, then you should pick a new thing. Let's throw it back to Andrea for the Q&A.
There you go. Fantastic. Thank you both very much for all the wonderful knowledge and all the wonderful insights you've shared with us. I'm going to give the audience a minute or two to kind of pop in some more questions that they may have. Somebody asked, will this be recorded? Yes. So this is recorded. You'll receive a recording in your inbox within a day or two. But we'd love to hear from you. So this is your chance to have that time with Michael and Nick and ask any sort of questions that you may have. In the meantime, I'd love to open up the floor to you, both of you, and see what your biggest piece of advice is for parents or students, or actually both would be really great. Anything that we haven't necessarily mentioned in tonight's presentation that you think is valuable for our audience to know.
So I think giving yourself time to do this, a lot of students, this is kind of the afterthought of like, oh no, I have 3 weeks, I need to get my statements done. This should be one of the first things you're working on, as well as like gathering letters of rec, that some of the things that take a longer time. But this should not be the last thing you do. This should be the first thing you do. I hear students who are like pushing this till December. This should be something that's like kind of working on through August and September, and then it's ready to revise. You have so much time that you feel really confident. And then also, if you have more colleges you want to do, you can adjust it instead of being really scrambling.
Yeah, so truly starting as early as possible. One piece of advice that I constantly give is when you're asking for letters of recommendation, you're probably not the only person that's asking for letters of recommendation. And teachers, I know I've been a teacher, I know Michael's been a teacher. When you have 200 students, you really have to be exceptional for me to remember more than, well, turned in homework on time, was polite, was not disruptive. And having your personal statement locked and loaded with your resume to send me in an email before you ask for a recommendation helps me remember what I should write about for you. So I think the personal statement is the first thing. And the other biggest piece of advice I give is with supplementals, you're going to have to tell a handful of different stories. And so getting that list that we talked about earlier rolling is going to help you identify what's a 600-word personal statement example and what's a 200-word personal statement example, because some of them you'll be able to repeat, but some of them you'll have to submit in parallel with each other. And people can tell when you've run out of stuff to talk about, but you still have to keep chugging through the word limit. So those are my two biggest examples. I see in the chat just any other examples of great essays aside from the clown story you recall. One of my students last year was a ceramicist and talked about a ceramics method called kitsuge, which is replacing the cracks in broken ceramics with gold, and used that as an organizing metaphor for describing a really challenging period in her life of a lot of loss. And I thought that was beautiful, but it's hard because it's easier for me to remember, and Michael, I don't know if this is true for you, it's easier for me to remember all the cliche ones that I've read 1,000 times versus the ones that I've thought, oh wow, that's incredible.
You get so many more of the cliche ones, it's hard to separate. I'd say one for me, this is a girl, she just finished up at Stanford, so this was a good essay, got her in there. It was about, she was a straight A student, and she wrote about how it's okay to believe in astrology, and she thinks it adds value to her life, even though she knows it's not scientific.
I love
and
that.
It actually maybe unintentionally read as a metaphor for why it's okay to believe in religion, but I don't know if that was her intent, but I'm like, this is really deep. So I thought it was very cool.
Yeah. And that's a great example for sort of that thinking outside the box, something that you're really excited in. I had a student last year that wrote about she's really passionate about doing her nails every year, and or every week, and what does that taught her about time management and priorities. And but yeah, lots of examples. To what extent can AI be used in essays? Michael, I'll let you answer first. I feel like I've talked at length about this elsewhere.
Ooh, this is a tough one. AI is obviously very new. This literally may be the first cycle this year or last year where AI is playing a more major role now that like GPT and some of these other tools are accessible. I would say, again, I've emphasized original work. You definitely should be, this should be mostly your voice. I know people who are writers that use AI to kind of shape their own thoughts and put their own style into it. And, in that sense, I think it's fine. I would not do, here's one sentence about my story, please write an essay for me as the AI prompt. So I'd say you start with the full thing and use AI to shape, and not the other way around.
Yes, I would also say, as a former faculty member who has read plenty of essays and plenty of responses that have clearly been AI generated, adults that read a lot of the same type of writing can tell when a person did not write it. And so if it's reading not like you to you, it's going to read extremely not like you to other people. So I would not start with AI, but if you're really stumped, it can be helpful, for a prompt.
So I'd love to jump in and ask a question now. What about AI for editing?
Think it's fine. Again, as long as it's your original work, I don't see a problem. Do be aware that AI is not perfect. These are language models. These are not like some magic robot in the sky who's going to tell you what is good about your paper. So be very careful. I would rather you use like a dedicated software like Grammarly that is like meant specifically to do that versus letting GPT run wild and give you bad grammar advice.
Right. And to Michael's point, these are, software built on large language models. They're also built on algorithms, and your algorithms are always a person. It's a person designing the algorithm, and some people make errors when they construct an algorithm. Microsoft Word still has suggestions for things that are wrong, 40 years later that you have to just manually fix. So, Grammarly is fine, but maybe have a pass over it. Or one thing that I always like is reading things aloud, because when you read them aloud, you realize, oh, that sounds crazy now that I've said it out loud with my voice. Yeah.
I'd also love to hop in and the individual that asked us about the great essays, and if we have any more examples, we actually have a ton of those. We have an entire database on our website. I believe it's 55 plus personal statements where, it's ones that have actually gotten students into some of the top schools. A quick Google search, college personal statement, examples, quad, will get you a ton of other results. And all of those are some of these outside of the box ones. Granted, I can't say I've read any that are exciting as the clown story, but there's some really good ones in there that you should be able to find pretty easily. And we'll make sure to include a link to our personal statement database for you as well on the follow-up email that'll include this video. In the meantime, we have about a minute or so remaining. I'd love to encourage our audience to pop in any sort of last questions that they have and really utilize this time. And if you're interested in working with counselors like Nick or Michael, it's about to call you Mike, but I don't think it's Michael. Definitely pull out your phones, scan the QR code, and book that free consultation. And it'll send you right to a page where you'll be able to do that. Gentlemen, do you see any more questions? I don't think I
don't see any. Start early. Students, if you're on here, start early. Parents, if you're on here, bring it up.
Until I put off and then get working.
There you go. I think this is a perfect place to end tonight's webinar. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate. Oh,
I see Evelyn raised a hand.
Evelyn, we'll give you a chance to get your question in. Or was that by accident? Might have been by accident. Evelyn, if you have a question, book a consultation or, oh, there we go. Okay, let's get this one in. Are you both okay with time?
Yeah.
I love this question. How can we become more creative with our essays?
I can go.
Yeah.
One thing that I always tell my students to do is if they're not already readers, to start becoming readers, because the amount of students I've had tell me, well, I want to be a pediatric oncologist when I grow up, and I'm like, well, you're 14. Let's maybe slow your roll on pediatric oncology, but maybe let's read an accessible book about what a career in pediatric oncology might look like from a popular science writer, and see case studies about that in practice. And so I think really just encouraging your students if you're parents, and encouraging yourself if you're students, to read broadly and to read voraciously, because reading is also going to make you a better writer, and it's also just going to give you things to grow from when you read really excellent writing.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice. I was going to say something similar. I'd also say just being open to new experiences. Try a club you've never tried before. Go volunteer somewhere you've never volunteered before. Go hang out with a person you haven't hung out with before. Anything that kind of breaks you out of the normal mold will help you just have more to access when the time comes to write the essay. If you're close to writing the essay, there are like kind of improv comedy exercises you can do. There's things that are, can get the creative juices flowing that are, we even highlighted some of them like mind maps. But I think reading a lot and then just making sure you get as many experiences as possible. It's going to make your essays a little bit more creative.